What's up, Ann Brothers?
Nothing. It's Sunday. It's warm here. There's a bit of a breeze coming into the window. Duncan and
Uh,
I went grocery shopping. We had breakfast at Beezy's. We got 2 coffees from Starbucks because they made a mistake on the first one, so we got the second one free.
I always like that. Let's
Me
see,
too.
what have I done this morning? I got up and I did the breakfast thing this morning. I went to McDonald's and I got our sausage McMuffin with egg, and it was a nice surprise because right now it's 2 for $4 for sausage McMuffin with eggs, and they just roll that into the price of the breakfast combo meal you get. So we saved like $3 on breakfast this morning, and
And
they had
breakfast at McDonald's
pies.
is cheap. And they had apple pie. The
Yep.
bakery was
The bakery
open.
was open, and I think they put extra sugar on their pies this time. I was like eating my pie. I'm like, oh my God, there's so much sugar on top of this pie.
Somebody felt bad for us. Like, yeah, you fatties need more
Yes.
sugar. We do.
And then
Thank you.
I did. I went and walked 4 miles this morning, which was nice, but it's so humid right now. The dew point's like 72. So I was just literally soaked from head to toe. And I'm like, all I'm doing is walking. And I was like, literally, I'd soaked through everything. And I was super excited today because I saw, count them, 4 Biden signs in Dresser, Wisconsin on my walk this morning. I know. So,
Wow.
yes.
Wow.
So I was like, yeah, good job, Dresser. Bring it. I was so excited to read too about all the speakers because like there were 10 speakers for the DNC last week.
Mm-hmm.
There's going to be 10 speakers for the RNC, and 6 of the 10 have the last name of Trump. Between the president, so it was like the president, Ivanka, Melania, whatever her name is.
Melania? I always call her Bologna. I can't remember.
John, Eric, and then they who did they dig up? Melanie?
Is that one of the daughters?
Yes.
Yeah, I think, I don't know.
Yeah. 6. Awesome.
Awesome. That's great. Well, hey,
yeah.
I'm sure in comparison, Melania, what is Joe Biden's wife's name? Jill. So Jill has her doctorate in education, and Melania has her doctorate in hotness, fading beauty.
Yep. Awesome.
Yeah.
So here we are on a Sunday, and there's some really cool science stuff happening right now. We'll start with this real quick, and I will kind of be working on some. We might talk about this now. Remember, we have a special guest on Wednesday. Jacob Hausman is going to be with us on Wednesday. He is a photographer up in the UP of Michigan, so that is awesome. But we've got some weather stuff going on. For the first time ever, we're going to have 2 very large tropical storms within the Gulf of Mexico at the same time. Tropical storm, what's her name? I can't think of it. And I got to look it up real quick. Hang on. Marco, and then the chick's named Laura. Marco and Laura in the Gulf of Mexico together, which is kind of nuts, but there you go.
I heard a report saying that they usually don't get to L and M names until like September and October. So that many storms. There's a lot of they've had a lot of earlier storms. So
a lot of energy, a lot of warm temperatures. Yeah, we are running warm as a planet this year. We're going to set new records for temperature this year. Again, we've literally set temperature marks for the last, I want to say 5 or 6 years in a row. So we're going to set temperature marks again. So yeah, that's going to happen. So Marco, they've already actually moved him to a category 1, and that's looking to hit Louisiana, Texas coast tomorrow, midday. And then right behind it's going to be Laura. That one's going to probably stream in a little farther east. Probably will reach category 1 status as well. So, 2020, keep bringing it.
Exactly.
So last week, Susie Nelson messaged me after we got done talking about our science stuff last Sunday, our derecho stuff on Sunday. And so she's like, what about these fire tornadoes? Because is this real? Because for the first time ever, the National Weather Service actually put out fire tornado warnings in California, which is nuts. I know. So she asked me if this is real, and I was like, it is real. So I thought we could talk a little bit about what's going on. So if you don't mind, we'll jump into that.
Sounds good.
So we talking wildfires today. And so if you're interested in what's going on, as always in the summer in the United States, the Western United States is, if you'll pardon the pun, a fire hotspot.
Mm-hmm.
There are major fires in pretty much all of the Western states, especially Utah, New Mexico, Arizona, Colorado, California. Colorado is having, because I lived in Colorado for a long time. I have a number of Colorado Facebook friends, and they're posting about just the extreme smoke within the state right now. And that's because there are 4 very large wildfires: the Pine Gulch, the Grizzly Creek, the Williams Fork, and the Cameron Peak Fire. These are all larger fires. When we're, in terms of their acreage, they're not terribly contained, and they're in some fairly tough spots right now. So, for instance, if we're looking the first one, and I'm on the Colorado side here, and if you're interested in learning more about this information, Colorado Public Radio has a very excellent fire page they have going right now. There's a ton of information on that. So right now, really big one is the Pine Gulch Fire, which is right outside of Grand Junction, Colorado. 120,000 acres, 14% contained. The one that's making everybody's life miserable is the Grizzly Creek Fire outside of Glenwood Springs, because it's basically burning around Glenwood Springs, and it's closed I-70 on several occasions already. And the other problem is that some of the outlets, the detour outlets, are not truck friendly because of all the hairpins. You've been up those passes, you know what I'm talking about. And so they're having to literally route trucks essentially down to 285 and up and around that way onto Highway 50. Oh, that's, we're literally talking about hundreds of miles of detours right there. It's bad news. If you've never been.
I was going to say, in Michigan, we don't have to go very far to find an alternate route, sometimes less than a mile to find an alternate route, usually no more than 5 or 6 miles. But in Colorado, there's like usually 2 ways in and out of a place, and they can be hundreds of miles apart.
Of detours, yeah. And and so I know that's been a source of a lot of tension in Colorado, is those I-70 closures. And again, these fires are devastating. There's 2 fires that are farther east, the William Fork Fire, which is the Arapahoe National Forest, which is outside of Silverthorne, just north of Silverthorne, and then the Cameron Peak Fires, which is in the Roosevelt National Forest, which is just north of Rocky Mountain National Park. Those 2 fires are really smoking up Denver quite a bit. The air quality in Denver is always kind of marginal, and then you add this fire smoke to it. I've got a friend, Gerardo Munoz, who's been doing weekly marathons, his Run for Justice marathon. He actually postponed that this week because the smoke is becoming a problem from him in those latter miles. So, just keep the faith, Munoz. It's going to clear up. You can do it. And, so it really is something else right now. It's really affecting quality of life for sure. We got Monica with us. Monica, you are living this front and center because you live in California, and right now, 2 of the largest fires are up there in Northern California in the Napa and the San Francisco areas. So you've got 2, the SCU Lightning Complex and the LNU Lightning Complex, and these are both massive fires. These are both pushing 400,000 acres each. Massive fires that are essentially creating their own wind, their own weather, and as a result of that, it's really bad. And again, part of the problem is that you're dealing with this is becoming an issue. Like there was, of course, devastating fires in 2018 in California. And we're seeing more and more of these large-scale firestorms that are happening out west, and it's because as our climate changes, Colorado is not getting nearly the winter snowpack that it was in the past. California is not getting those seasonal rains that they normally get, and as a result of that, their fire danger becomes much greater. Monica just wanted to jump in. She said actually more in the middle. She said she's not in the mountains, but she's closer to the bay. Where there's many more escape routes, and that's good.
Glad to hear that.
Like I said, fire season in this country is, like I said, it's always present, especially in the Western United States. And then, localized seasonal conditions can make those seasons, better or worse depending on what kind of weather. I know Colorado has been especially hot and dry this year. I've gotten feedback from friends out in Colorado talking about just extended days of 90-degree weather and little or no humidity, and that really takes its toll for sure. As far as one of the conundrums with the United States is our historical fire mitigation. The United States is notoriously bad for our fire mitigation because we do not control fire like, say, the Swedes do. We're not great about how we deal with fires, letting fires burn, controlled burns, where we build in relation to forests. We've had a very sort of hands-off when it comes to that. And as a result of that, when we tend to have an explosive fire season, it's much worse. And that's historically the way it's always been in the United States. Like I said, the approach we take to mitigating fire in the end actually makes our wildfire season much worse than it should be, so to speak. Yeah, Monica, I think that's a really good idea. She said she's still packing a bag just in case. And honestly, if you've got fires in your area, Monica, that's a really important strategy, because one of the things I've learned about fire science over the last couple of years in my readings is that fire is surprisingly fast, especially when you get to those higher stages of fire. So what I did is, and here's some satellite images. This is a satellite image of Colorado, and these are those 4 fires that I'm talking about. This is a nighttime shot from space. Grand Junction, Glenwood Springs, Silverthorne, Rocky Mountain National Park right there. So as you can see, those are significant fires. If we're looking at this particular screenshot, we are looking at some of the fire data from California right here. And you can see these 2 big fire complexes up north around Santa Rosa, and then down here a little bit south of San Francisco. So yeah, it's not great right now out west. So if we're talking about wildfires, and Monica, we're going to go back to your point about staying ready, is that there's essentially 3 types of wildfires that can merge into a 4th type. But your basic type of wildfires, the first is what we call a ground fire. And you can see from the picture that this is a ground fire is essentially, it's low energy. They progress, they creep through just the litter like pine needles, roots, any sort of stuff that's jettisoned from trees. It's oftentimes will be started by lightning. It smolders through. Like I said, it's a low energy fire, and it's essentially on the surface or just below the surface where you get these ground fires. Your best hope at containing a fire is containing it at the ground fire level, because you can essentially you can cut its lines, you can stop its progression, you can clean up what's there. That sort of litter to try and sort of just allow it to be brought down. If a fire gets to the next level, it's what we call a surface fire. Surface fires, they burn in that vegetative layer just above the floor. So like you can see in this picture, trunks of trees, low-lying branches, those are things that are going to get hit up in a surface fire. Any wood that happens to be on your floor. If we look at Minnesota has 2, and we're going to talk about this towards the end of our broadcast today, has had 2 devastating firestorms in its history. And both of those fires can be attributed to not just climate, but to what the lumber companies did back in the day, which was to essentially, they just wanted those big white pine trunks. And so they would slash them, they would cut the branches off, they would leave all of those branches behind and simply take the logs with them. And so they would have all of this this scar material, this scrap material that would burn along with everything else. That's what you get what you're burning when you have those surface fires. They move faster. Their energy level starts to grow greatly, and they produce, like I said, those moderate height flames where they're going to work their way up the trunk. And then finally, when things start to go really bad, if you don't contain that ground fire, if you don't contain that surface fire, and if there's enough energy, then you start moving into your crown fires. Your crown fires burn at the treetops, into the canopy itself. They move very quickly. They have a ton of energy at this point. In order to work their way up that tree, they can easily jump from one treetop to the next. They're very difficult to contain when you get to the crown stage. So what we're seeing in Colorado, what we're seeing in California, what we're seeing in Arizona, Utah, is that we're seeing, once you get to a certain energy level, you start to crown, and then your acreage starts to really expand in terms of what you're burning. Questions, comments, concerns so far? Anybody? Okay.
Terrifying.
It is. You know, it's interesting because I didn't realize, the thing about fire is that most people, our experience with fire is like our campfire, or maybe on occasion we'll have a big bonfire. When I was working, I spent 4 summers working at Consumers Energy at a natural gas compressor station, and I didn't really know or understand fire until I worked there, because we had to go to fire school to start every season. So they basically, you go to fire school, they set fires, and then you have to use the equipment that you would have at your your compressor station to put those fires out. And at one point, they basically take this big wall and they set it on fire with like gas burner sort of fire, and it's huge and it's hot. And then you have to take your little fire extinguisher and put that fire out. And they teach you how to to come out that fire. But that was the first time I had really experienced how amazingly hot and terrifying a big fire is. It's unbelievable. It really does. It's one of those things where there are things that prompt you to run away. Man, nothing will prompt you to run away like a big fire. That's all I know, is that the first time they torch up that wall and you're walking at that with your little fire extinguisher and you start to feel the heat, my first reaction was like, no.
I'm out of here. Not paying me enough.
Every fiber of my being says, go the other way. So yeah, it's super terrifying. Now, the thing about fires, when we get to the crown fire stage, we are dealing with tremendous amounts of heat and energy. And once we get to that crown stage, we're starting to get to the point where we have enough heat and energy. And if there's enough burning around us, that we'll start to form what's called a convection column, or a convection cell, or a pyrocumulus clouds. And if you get to the pyrocumulus stage, bad things happen. Okay, so first off, let's talk a little bit about convection. Convection itself, convection happens in nature pretty much continuously. Convection is a process that literally transcends whether you're talking about earth science or biology or chemistry. It is a foundational process of the natural world. And essentially what it means is that liquid or gas gets heated. The particles within that start to move away from each other as they have more energy. As a result, density changes and stuff rises. A lava lamp is probably the easiest, most, attainable mental model of what convection is. And that's what's happening here. This waxy stuff gets heated. It becomes less dense, it rises, it gets away from the heat source, the particles come back together, it gets more dense again, and it sinks back down. And that's what's happening in nature. It happens in nature to make regular clouds. It happens in nature to make cumulonimbus clouds. It happens in nature when we have a large fire that starts to get bigger and gain more energy. And then we start forming these massive pyrocumulus clouds. So what happens, and this is the part that's really tough about big wildfires, is that you can have a big wildfire that gets bad because wind, just from like a low pressure system or a high pressure system, will start feeding that. But once a fire gets big enough, it starts creating its own wind, because what you have, down here at the bottom of the fire, it's really hot, air starts to rise. And what happens, nature does not like a vacuum. So as the air rises at the bottom of the column, air gets sucked in from the sides. And as that air gets sucked in, it creates a tremendous amount of wind. That's why you have winds that are associated with large fires. Even if it's not a windy day, they're making their own wind. And that wind, depending on the size of the fire, can be 100 miles an hour. And in those massive historical firestorms, that's what we've seen. Is it's not just the fire, it's the wind that goes with it, because not only does it dry out what's already on the floor of any particular forest, but it also fans the flames that already exist. So the hard part about trying to fight a fire like this is that you have to fight so many things all at once, and you have to do it from a distance, you have to do it from the air. And these are not things that are oftentimes that can be contained by people. And we'll talk about that in just a minute. Okay, so Susie Nelson, this one's for you. This is fire vortices. And when the National Weather Service was forecasting fire vortices, basically what they were saying is that, look, these fires are going to get big enough that they're going to have convection columns. And if the convection columns are tight enough and large enough, they can create these fire vortices or fire tornadoes or fire whirls or whatever you want to call them. Because again, if my fire is large enough, if I've crowned, if I'm creating convection, this stuff is rising so quickly. And because of the Coriolis effect, it's going to start to rotate in a counterclockwise way in the northern hemisphere. And as long as that rotation is tight enough, and if in other words, you guys, the heat, this air is rising very quickly and it's spinning at the same time, and it forms these tight columns of rotating heated air, and then boom, you have a fire whirl out in front of your vortice. The problem is that that's going to help spread your fire. So it's not only going to be the result of these convection cells, but it's also going to set more things on fire as it continues to move out in front of your firestorm. So, all right. So again, ground fires, surface fires. Boom, I can't think of the last one. What's it called? Crown fires.
Crown fires.
You can get to a point where you can move beyond crown fire. And I'm going to talk about this book at the end a little bit. But if you read the book Under a Flaming Sky, which chronicles the Hinckley firestorm of 1894, what you have is that if you have enough crown fires and they start to create these convection cells, and if these convection cells start to come together, what happens is that you start to have a fire explosion. And I could literally talk for another hour about the conditions that form an explosion or fire blow up. But essentially what happens when you have enough storms, these firestorms that come together, you create these mass fires. And so when a fire reaches a certain intensity in terms of heat and energy and internal winds, because a lot of times these internal winds, as your convection goes up, will be 40 or 50 miles an hour. If this thing gets intense enough, you've gone from the crown, you've left the crown stage, and you've entered what's called the mass fire or the firestorm. When you reach a classification of mass fire, that's when that's what's happening in Colorado right now. That's what's happening in California, is that you're not just fighting these single crown events. You're literally you're trying to fight what is essentially a cumulonimbus cloud of a fire. Okay. As far as mass fires, otherwise known as firestorms, otherwise known as conflagrations. So a mass fire, you guys, is essentially a firestorm that's essentially stationary or not moving very fast. A conflagration, these are the ones that get moving. And a conflagration can move because of wind. It can move because of a slope. And when they move, they can move up to 15 miles an hour, sometimes even a little bit more. You can't outrun a conflagration. And that's a misconception that you can somehow get out of the way of a fire. Monica, that's a really good reason for you to have your bag packed, is that when you're told to evacuate, you need to evacuate, because you're dealing with something that is completely outside of your experience in terms of what to do, where to go, how to handle it. When you get to the mass fire stage, the movement of the fire becomes incredibly erratic because you've got this massive spinning heated material. It's going to go where it wants to go. And they've seen that. I can't think of the storm system like in, I want to say 1967 in Idaho. They could tell just by how the trees were knocked over that that this thing was a mess, that it wasn't just, sorry, my mouse is doing weird things right now, that it wasn't just straight line winds, that it was vortex type winds that were taking these trees and just tossing them however which way. So like I said, the speed and the movement of a firestorm is very erratic, hard to predict. That's one of the reasons that the fire might not be that close to you. You should get out of there anyway if you're told to evacuate, because what they're saying is like, we think we know this is where it's going to go, but we're not entirely sure. Mass fires, you guys, they're hot enough where they're going to ignite heat in structures before the fire ever gets to you. They can generate 500 million BTUs of energy. That's a Hiroshima bomb plus. They can generate 100-mile-an-hour winds. They can produce enough convection to pick up large trees and objects, pick them up 18,000 feet in the air, and toss them in front of that fire column. And as a result of that, that's one of the reasons firestorms are so hard to contain. They've been known to produce large floating explosive bubbles of gas, like the size of a car, large. And when those bubbles of gas pop, they basically pop gaseous fire. Temperatures in a mass fire can reach up to 1,500 to 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit, and flames can reach 200 to 500 feet in the air. So if you're dealing with a mass fire, it's the end of the earth, so to speak. As far as historically deadly mass fires in the United States, these are the top 10 in terms of loss of life. The Peshtigo fire in 1871 is the deadliest fire, and I want to say there were 2,200 people killed in that fire, and that took place over just like a 24-hour period. Same with the Great Hinckley Fire, the Cloquet Fire as well. These are fire events that lasted a couple of, not even an entire day. They burned themselves out, they ran out of fuel, whatever you want to say, but it's amazing how much they destroyed in just a very short amount of time. The Peshtigo fire, you guys, is actually a really interesting historical fire because the storm system, the low pressure system that created the Peshtigo firestorm in 1871 was the same storm system that caused the Chicago fire, the Great Chicago Fire. It's also the same fire system that caused all of the fires in Michigan on the same day. So though the Chicago fire gets all the press, I want to say it was October 8th, 1871. That date sounds familiar. But, you know, the Chicago fire gets all of the press, but it was the smallest and the least deadly of those fires. As you can see, you've got the Great Michigan Fire of 1871, the Peshtigo Fire of 1871, all part of the same system of fires, happening 100 miles apart, but the conditions, again, were just right. Hinckley Fire of 1894, I want to say 400 people killed. Cloquet Fire, still the deadliest fire in Minnesota history, over 500 people killed. And again, you're starting to see more of these fires like the Camp Fire in California, the Tubbs Fire in California. And maybe one of the most tragic was the Yarnell Hill Fire in Arizona, in which 19 smoke jumpers were killed in that fire. And again, it was one of those things where a fire, you had a fire blow up, firestorm, this thing got rolling, and this group of firefighters was unfortunately trapped in a box canyon. So, you know, it's one of those things where all you can really do is, if you live in a fire zone, is to educate yourself and, you know, do your fire mitigation as best you can. If you'd like to know more, this book, Under a Flaming Sky, is a really excellent read. It's the same author that wrote The Boys in the Boat, which is one of my favorite authors, or one of my favorite books. Daniel James Brown does a nice job. He's a very detailed writer. It's very interesting because he does a good job of setting up the story. He wrote about this specifically because his grandfather was killed in the Hinckley Fire. And so he felt it was important to write about it. So it details the Hinckley firestorm of 1894. It's an excellent historical look at the regions and the conditions that contributed to the disaster. One of the reasons I like Daniel James Brown is that he's a good researcher, and he really does a nice job of painting what the forests were like, the practices of the lumber barons, and it was disgusting. And the weather conditions that were necessary for this to happen. Totally fascinating. Note, there is a particularly gruesome chapter where he details the 3 ways in which fire kills you. And I got to tell you, it's horrible. That chapter is a tough read. Whew. Ugh. But anyway, fire, that's what's happening. If you're in California, Colorado, any place right now that's dealing with wildfire, you be careful, okay? Take it easy. And yes, the air quality is affected everywhere. So, you know, watch yourself, watch those lungs, take care of yourself. So anyway, your thoughts, Ann Brothers?
Well, I did in the Michigan fire, the Chicago fire. It was that was the start of American Red Cross. They got started after those fires. That's how that organization started. So
Nice.
We see them always on the front lines of trying to help people after the fire has come through and destroyed everything, or trying to help people evacuate. So that's where that came from.
There you go. Yeah, and it's really interesting because, you know, even though the Peshtigo fire and the Michigan fires were much worse than the Chicago fire, you know, there's something about a major metropolis getting burned to the ground that people, you know, they can't get enough of. So, right. You know, but so now if you didn't know, now you know.
Now you know.
Yep.
Now you know.
Yeah. So this book bummed me out so much. The thing about this particular book is that I learned a ton listening to it, and I especially learned a lot about fire behavior, especially in a mass fire or a firestorm. And it just bummed me out because Hinckley was never, you know, like I said, Hinckley was sort of at the forefront of that lumber time when it was, you know. And after this fire, it was never the same. That town was never the same. It was never the same for the people that lived there, those that survived. So, you know, you can't, you know, just when you have something that devastates, it's as these do, it's really hard to recover, hard to come back from that. So, yeah. Anyway, yeah,
Indeed. Okay.
that's a lot. So, for like I said, folks, you know, be careful out there. Folks in the Gulf, you guys, batten down the hatches, go inland. They're saying 4 to 6 foot storm surge from Marco today and tomorrow, and that's at the peak of tide. So, like I said, be careful. You know, don't go out to a hurricane party, for crying out loud.
No, no. Peoples.
Yep. Anyway, that's it. That's all you need to know about. Well, it's not all you need to know, but if you have more interest in that, you know, there's a couple of some excellent resources out there for sure, and that book is a good one. So there you have it.
Thank you, Jenny Brothers.
You're welcome, Ann Brothers. And hey, you guys, like I said, we'll be back on Wednesday. We'll have Jacob Hausman with us. He's going to be talking photography, which is awesome because I don't know anything about photography. Nothing. You take your phone and you point it at something and you're like, click, and you're like, ooh, that's bad. Click, click. So yeah, anyway, we will be back live on Wednesday. We'll be back live on Thursday because what are we doing Thursday? Is it my turn?
Oh, yeah. No, we will be back on Thursday because if you want to, I'm going to be gone that day. So.
That's right, you guys. We're gonna shortchange you this week. We'll be back Wednesday talking to House Band, and then we won't be back till probably Sunday. So no movie review this week, and that's okay. That's okay. It'll give me time.
Hey, your movies. It will be your turn next week.
Okay, so I got to come up with a movie. Okay, fine. I did notice that they put out the new Wonder Woman trailer. Wonder Woman 1984. Kristen Wiig is in this one, and I love Kristen Wiig. She's the villain in this. So
awesome. She'll make an excellent villain.
I think so too. I love her. I adore her. So yeah, and they're supposed to be releasing it in theaters in October. And I'm like, yay, theater. I know they opened up the big multiplexes in Minnesota this week because they've been open in Wisconsin for a while, but the multiplexes are open, and I thought it was very interesting because they're really looking to limit people using cash. They don't want people using cash at these, so they don't have to handle the cash, which I get. But I also wonder, you know, there's a lot of people out there that don't have the means to get debit cards and bank accounts and stuff, you know. So I worry.
And,
I don't think that's equitable.
You know, you want to limit people from cash, but legally you have to take it.
Yeah.
So it's legal tender. So you might want to limit it, but you can't say no to it. So
take the cash, put some gloves on. Okay. So, all right, everybody, that's it for today. We will talk to you soon. I hope you're having a happy Sunday. It's very sticky here. Hopefully, yeah. Well, it's that time of year. It's still August after all. So
it's still summer. Another month.
I know. All right. Peace out, you guys.
Bye, guys. Thank you.